You ever notice the same person who laughs the hardest at a roast joke is the first one to say, "That's not funny," when the joke is about them? Exactly who I'm talking about. And here's the thing that nobody wants to say out loud. Roasting isn't just comedy. It's a social contract. And depending on which group you belong to, you either sign that contract willingly, or it gets signed for you. Welcome to the most complicated thing happening in humor right now, and nobody's talking about it honestly. Actually, hold on real quick. I see a lot of you watching this video top to bottom, and I genuinely appreciate that. I really do. But a good chunk of you haven't subscribed yet. And look, I get it, no pressure. But if you want to actually stay updated when I drop stuff like this, just hit that subscribe button right now. It takes literally 2 seconds, and then you never have to worry about missing out. Now let's get into it, because this topic, it goes deep. So let's start simple. Roasting, at its core, is the act of making fun of someone to their face, usually in a way that's supposed to be affectionate. I'm clowning you because we're close enough that I love you. That's the ideal version, and for most of human history, that's basically what it was. Friends around a campfire, office guys at lunch, family members at Thanksgiving who never let you forget that one thing you did in 2007 that you'd really love everyone to just forget already. But somewhere along the way, especially in the last 15 to 20 years, roast culture got turbocharged. Comedy Central had their celebrity roasts. Then came the internet. Then came Twitter and TikTok. And suddenly roasting wasn't just a thing between two people who knew each other. It became a sport. A public sport, watched by millions. And that's where things started getting complicated. Because when roasting was private, between friends who actually knew each other, there were unspoken rules. You knew what lines not to cross. You knew what was off limits. You had context. But when roasting goes public, those rules get blurry. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The rules don't disappear. They just get decided by the crowd instead of the people involved. Here's a question I want you to genuinely think about. Why is it that certain people, certain groups, certain types, they seem to always end up as the punchline, consistently, across time, across cultures, and other groups? You make one joke even slightly pointing in their direction, and suddenly the entire comment section looks like a crime scene investigation. This is what researchers and sociologists actually call safe target theory. Basically, societies at any given time have groups that are socially designated as acceptable targets for humor. And these groups tend to share one thing in common. They either hold significant social power, or they're in a position where complaining about the joke would make them look worse than the joke itself. Think about it. Bald guys, short guys, guys in general honestly, redheads, middle managers, people who still use Internet Explorer, people from New Jersey, no offense New Jersey, you know we. These are all groups that have, over time, become sort of punchlines, and nobody really rises up to defend them. Why? Because the roasting doesn't threaten their actual social position. A bald guy getting roasted at a wedding doesn't lose his job the next day. A short guy getting clowned by his friends doesn't suddenly face systemic disadvantage. The roast is just the roast. But now flip it. Try making a casual joke about a group that's historically been marginalized, or currently navigating genuine social struggles, and the reaction is completely different. Not because the joke was necessarily more mean-spirited, but because the context of the joke carries weight that goes beyond the comedy club. And that's the thing that a lot of people who grew up in one era of comedy genuinely don't understand about people who grew up in another. Okay, so now we're getting to the heart of it. Because this isn't just a comedy debate. This is a generational debate. And I'm going to be straight with you. If you're between 30 and 50 watching this, you are sitting right in the middle of this culture war, and you probably feel it every single day. Because you grew up in an era where roasting was normal. Where your boys would absolutely destroy you over anything, and you were expected to laugh and fire back. Where political correctness was a punchline in itself. Where Don Rickles was a legend precisely because he spared nobody. Where the whole point was that nobody was off limits. And then you look at what's happening now, and it feels like suddenly everything is off limits. And people in that 30 to 50 bracket, a lot of them feel genuinely confused. Like the rules changed overnight without anyone telling them. But here's the thing, and I say this with zero judgment. The rules didn't actually change overnight. They were always there. You just happened to be in the groups that never felt the weight of them. Now contrast that with Gen Z, kids who grew up watching people get professionally canceled for tweets from a decade ago. Who watched public figures' entire careers evaporate over one bad punchline. For them, words aren't just words. Words are weapons with documented consequences, and so their relationship to roasting is fundamentally different. It's not that they can't take a joke, it's that they've watched too many people get genuinely hurt by things that were called jokes. Neither side is entirely wrong. Both sides are missing part of the picture. Let me give you a real-life scenario because this is where it gets almost poetic. Imagine a group of 5 black friends. They're hanging out, they're comfortable, and one of them makes a joke that would, if said by literally anyone else in any other setting, be considered completely unacceptable. But in that room, everybody laughs. Nobody's offended. The joke lands. Why? Because there's an unspoken permission structure. There's shared experience. There's context. The joke isn't punching down, it's punching inward, between people who all know what it actually means and where it's coming from. Now put that exact same joke in the mouth of someone outside that group, and suddenly it's not funny. And people from outside that group get frustrated and say, "But why? The words were the same." And yes, the words were the same, but the meaning wasn't. The power dynamic wasn't. The shared context wasn't. This is the group identity piece that completely changes how roasting works. Every group has its own internal roast culture. Jewish comedians have been roasting Jewish identity for 100 years. Women comedians roast womanhood. Working class comics roast working class life. And it's hilarious, specifically because of the intimacy of it. But when that same material crosses out of the group, the intimacy evaporates, and all that's left is the punchline, which, without context, can land very differently. This isn't a new concept, by the way. Your grandparents understood this. There's always been stuff that's family talk versus what you say in public. What's changed is that social media collapsed the distance between those two contexts completely. Now everything is public, always. Here's where I want to push back on something that gets thrown around a lot. Just take a joke. 4 words that are doing a lot of heavy lifting in these conversations. And look, yes, there is something to be said for not being so fragile that mild ribbing sends you into a spiral. Absolutely. The ability to laugh at yourself is genuinely a marker of confidence and security. If you can't handle being teased by people who care about you, that's worth examining. But just take a joke has also historically been used as a silencing mechanism, as a way to say you're not allowed to point out that this joke was actually cruel, or that it reinforced something harmful, because doing so makes you the problem instead of the joke being the problem. And that's where it gets manipulative. The difference between a roast that bonds people and a roast that damages people isn't always obvious from the outside, but the person receiving the roast usually knows. They know if the laughter feels warm or if it feels like a spotlight on something they're genuinely insecure about. Real roast culture, at its best, punches at things people can genuinely shake off. It doesn't pick at wounds. It doesn't weaponize insecurities disguised as comedy. When a roast consistently targets the same person in the same way, their weight, their relationship status, their family situation, and that person keeps fake laughing because they feel like they can't say anything, that's not comedy anymore. That's just bullying with a live studio audience. Let's talk about something that I don't think gets enough credit in these conversations. The scale. When your uncle used to roast you at the dinner table in 1995, the audience was 8 people who loved you and would forget about it by dessert. When someone gets roasted on the internet in 2024, the audience is potentially millions. The clip lives forever. It gets clipped, reshared, stripped of context, and served to strangers on the other side of the world, who have zero idea who this person is or what their relationship is to the person doing the roasting. That's a completely different thing. And one of the biggest disconnects between older generations and younger ones is that older folks experience roasting at small scale. The damage had a natural ceiling. Younger people grew up watching the internet burn people alive, completely at scale with no ceiling at all. So when a millennial or Gen X person says, "Back in my day we just roasted each other and got over it," they're technically right, but the environment they're describing no longer exists. The game changed. A joke that everyone would have laughed at in 1998 exists in a completely different ecosystem now, and pretending otherwise isn't bravery or a defense of free speech. It's just being unwilling to update your map when the terrain has changed. Okay, I've been heavy for a few minutes. Let me give you the good news. Roasting, real, warm, funny, bonding, roasting, is not dead, not even close. And I'd argue the people who do it best are actually getting better at it, not worse, because they've figured out the formula. The best roasts? They punch at behavior, not identity. They poke fun at things the person actually has control over. Your fashion choices, your weird habits, that thing you do when you're nervous. The fact that you've watched The Office 9 times and still quote it like you discovered it. The best roasts also have consent baked in. Not always spoken, but understood. Both parties know the game. Both parties are players. There's mutual roastability. And crucially, the best roasts are delivered by people who the target knows are coming from a place of love, not people using humor as a Trojan horse for actual contempt. You can feel the difference. I know you can. Think about the last time someone roasted you, and it felt good, versus the last time someone roasted you, and you laughed, but your stomach dropped a little. You know the difference. Everyone does. Boomers largely grew up with comedy that had no safe zones. Don Rickles, roast tradition, blue-collar humor. Being able to take a punch was a sign of strength. Gen X inherited that, added irony and sarcasm, and basically invented the we don't care approach to comedy. Dark humor as a coping mechanism. Gallows humor as a survival skill. Millennials grew up in the transition period. Old enough to remember when nothing was off limits, young enough to have watched the internet torch people in real time. They're split, deeply, messily split. And that's why millennials are honestly the most interesting generation to watch in this debate. Gen Z came in with the full awareness of consequence. They didn't unlearn old rules, they never learned them. For them, just a joke was never the default setting. And Gen Alpha? Honestly, watching that generation develop their humor is going to be one of the most fascinating social experiments in history. They're growing up with everything. All of the context, all of the consequences, and they're still finding ways to be absolutely unhinged online. So maybe the cycle just keeps going. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Roast culture is a mirror. It shows us exactly what a society thinks about its own pecking order. Who's on top gets protected by the discomfort of mocking them. Who's on the bottom gets, it's just jokes, lighten up. The generational shift we're seeing right now isn't about people getting weaker. It's about people becoming more aware of that dynamic. And some people find that awareness liberating, and some people find it suffocating. Both reactions make sense given where those people came from. The real skill, and honestly, the real maturity, is being able to hold both truths at the same time. Comedy is important. Laughter is necessary. Being able to laugh at yourself is healthy. And the context of a joke matters. The target matters. The relationship matters. The power dynamic matters. None of that cancels out the other. The funniest people I know, and I mean funny people, they understand all of this intuitively. They read the room. They know when to go hard and when to ease off. They know who they're talking to and what the shared context is. They're not funnier because they ignore the rules. They're funnier because they actually understand them. So next time someone says, it's just a joke, ask yourself, just a joke to who? And next time someone says, you can't say anything anymore, ask yourself, or did the room just change and you haven't updated? Neither roasting nor sensitivity is the villain here. It's the laziness of people who roast without thinking, and the laziness of people who shut down without engaging. The conversation itself is the point. Keep having it. If this video made you think, even if it made you disagree, that means it did its job. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you land on this. And hey, if you've made it this far in the video and you're still not subscribed, come on. You clearly like what we're doing here. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you actually get notified and come back for the next one. We cover stuff like this all the time. The things people are thinking about but not quite saying out loud. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.